So we'd like to dedicate today's Shiur in the memory of Michael Ruvain Halevi, Ben Chaim Yitzhak Halevi, Mr. Ruvain Brown, who passed away. We had just celebrated his Shloshim, and I don't have to say about how special the family is, and what I can say is this. They helped me personally with my aliyah in a profound way, because my young daughter Ayala, who came here at age 14, was leaving behind all her friends, and she found welcome friends and her grandchildren, and it brightened her life and paved the way for a very successful aliyah. And I was joke with your son Mordechai Zangazund that I have to pay you some rent, but for all the time that my daughter occupied space in your home. I want to also welcome, besides Charlie, I'm sorry?
She called me Santa and everything.
Exactly, right. So that certainly adds to the connection of making the Shiur in his memory. We're very honored to have you. I'm also very honored to have my mother-in-law, Rabbi Parolovavik, and my wife, Hani, they left behind their community and their work as community chaplains in New Jersey, and said, well, despite all our responsibilities, we have to come see our children and grandchildren, and they came with a serious nefesh, and we appreciate their stay with us. And today we're going to go to Hebron, Be'ezrat Hashem, and we'll have everybody in mind for tefillos. We also want to wish a refuah shalema to Adina Bas Malka Esther, Malia Esther, who's having a surgery today, a young child, your baby.
What happened?
A child, so we'll keep her in your tefillos, Adina Bas Malia Esther. So, appropriately, the title of today's Shiur is From Darkness to Light. Some reflections on Parsha Tetzaveh, and particularly the mitzvah of the menorah, and also as a memorial to those who were lost in the Parkland, Florida massacre, including 5 Yidden. And that occurred this past Wednesday, so it's still in the Shiva period. This is the next to last day of their Shiva. Actually, today, not really, because if they only had the Levayas on Thursday, so then we're still, right in the midst of the Shiva. And so I want to dedicate the Shiur in their memory, and we'll reflect upon it from the context of the Parsha, particularly the mitzvah of the menorah, and also Chodesh Adar, and the upcoming Chag of Purim, because this is Parshas Zachor. So we'll keep everything in that context. So let's begin. We know that when something happens in the world of a tragic proportion, that Chazal tell us that part of what we are responsible to do is to reflect on it and take some musar, and also particularly Am Yisrael, whether it involves Am Yisrael or not. Let's say a big natural tragedy. Even, I think, was it last night or the night before, there was really loud thunder. I don't know if you heard that thunder early in the morning. I think it was the loudest thunder I've ever heard in Israel. It reminded me of the Catskills, And, booming thunder. And Chazal talk to us about that idea when there's kolos and brokim and zvos. It's trying to get our attention. So it's incumbent upon us to think about it this very, very tragic week, and a number of tragedies here in Eretz Yisrael as well, including the loss of a shot down on Shabbos Kodesh, an F-15 fighter, which only cost like a few $1 billion, and 2 pilots were terribly wounded, and then there were 4, I think, soldiers that were terribly wounded this week on the border. So if you look at now they're saying that it was just a function or a failure, but it definitely had something to do with the missiles that were shot at it, and we need divine protection. When Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, so we experienced the first avalanche of missiles and projectiles when Mitzrayim caught up to us on the Yam Suf, and that evening they would have destroyed us completely. And they fired at us weapons of destruction, and they were all captured by the Anan HaKavod, Hashem's divine protection. And that's what we're davening for, some divine protection from some of these harsh moments. We do associate Amalek, which is the prime antithesis of Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael's arch enemy, as it were, is Amalek. And we say Reishis Goyim Amalek, and also we say about Klal Yisrael, Bereshis Bar Elokim, Bishvil Yisrael Shenikra Reishis. So it's Zeh mul Zeh. If there was a clear antagonist, and who are the two most visible figures in Am Yisrael and also in Amalek? Who are the most visible figures? Who is the most famous biblical figures of Am Yisrael versus Amalek? Haman versus Moshe Rabbeinu. And it comes out that this week's Parsha, Parsha Tetzaveh, which often comes out on Parsha Zachor, what about Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu's name is hidden. Moshe Rabbeinu's name, this is the only Parsha in which Moshe Rabbeinu's name does not appear from the time he's born. And there's a lot written about why that is. He asked for it, right. So Chazal tell us that he said, by Chet HaEgel, he said, look, Hashem, if you're not going to forgive the Jewish people, then mecheni na misifrecha, and erase me from your Torah. And so Chazal tell us that when the tzaddik says something, tzaddik goyzer, Akash Baruch Hu mekayim. Chaim Charlie. Okay. Thank you so much. And so that was in next week's parsha, Parshas Kisisa, where we encountered the Chet HaEgel. So it was spun around the entire Torah and comes out the other side, which is Parshas Tetzaveh, the last parsha of all the parshas, full cycle. That's where Moshe's name is absent. And think about it. What's our mitzvah regarding Amalek? Mechias Amalek. What did Moshe experience? We had the Mechias Shem, right? So we see a parallel. There's another very simple and interesting parallel is, where's the first time Hey Mem Nun appears in the Torah? In different ways. Ha min ha'etz hazeh, which is what? The words of the Nachash, the representative of the Satan, representative of, who is what? Satan is the Malach of Esav, and therefore Amalek. So here we have in the Torah the first appearance of Amalek, Esav, in the form of the Nachash. And what are his words? Hamin ha'etz hazeh. Should you eat from this tree? Okay, now the tree was Eitz hadas tov v'ra. So, and Chava was confused. She was confused by the Nachash's words. And he was able to logically demonstrate to her that the mitzvah of Hashem didn't seem to make sense and therefore could be cast aside and violated.
It was really Adam's fault because he... No.
Yeah, I agree.
He,
it's always the man's fault anyway. That's we have to understand that. I've been well trained.
God told him that he should eat from it, but he figured, he's going to be,
A chacham.
And he said to her they shouldn't touch it. So then when the Nachash pushed her against the tree,
right,
she didn't die.
Which shows you that Torah has to be emes. Torah is emes. Okay, the problem with the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra is that we get confused, we don't know what's emes and what's sheker. Therefore, we come into a status of Safek. Safek is Gematria Amalek. When we don't know with clarity what is good and what is bad, there is Safek, and that's our vulnerable point. The purpose of Torah learning and the purpose of mitzvos is to be mevarer the tov min hara. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says that any day that you don't learn a halacha or two, that day is very, very hard to repair with tshuva, in case you did anything wrong, which we always do, something. You have to establish something in that day connected to Torah in which you actually separated the good from the bad, the halacha and the non-halacha, the correct from the incorrect. Therefore, you have to learn some halacha during that day, engage in the process of birur, tov v'ra, emes and sheker, and then that day has potential to be all sorted out. as we know, ultimately all for the good. So let me then, I have an entire shiur prepared for you, but I'm giving you this little bit about Amalek because I was just moved by this tragedy so much, so I wanted to share a couple of words while it was timely. And then we'll move on to the menorah, which is very, very connected. The idea of suffix, lack of clarity, is associated with choshech, or darkness, because you cannot see. And you cannot see which way to go, what to do, what's proper. The day dawns, and we have which mitzvah? The mitzvah of tzitzis. When does the mitzvah of tzitzis begin? When you can start to distinguish colors. All right? You can start to see the tcheles amidst the lavan. But darkness is the ma'akev, in a metaphorical sense, from doing mitzvos. It says that the Mitzrim and Mitzrayim sat on their chairs for 3 days and could not move. Therefore, they were immobilized. So choshek is an immobilization towards an action of a mitzvah. You're immobilized. There's nothing you can do. You're plunged into darkness. So heder ha'or, blocking the light, is the activity of Amalek and the Satan. What the Satan wants to do is remove the light of clarity from your mind and cast in it all sorts of doubts. And due to the lack of clarity, you're going to make mistakes and you'll be vulnerable to chet. Because chet will only come if it's a mistake. You're mistaken. We don't do the chetayim lahachis, essentially. We do it because of a mistake. Mistaken assumptions, mistaken ideas. Okay. The item in the Mishkan that represents Or is the menorah. The menorah, what is its purpose, really? So let's understand. Chazal tell us that, the Midrashim say, that the Mishkan was a reconstruction of the world. If the Nachash, Satan, Amalek come to destroy the world, and the name means Am-lek, Am-lak. Lak means literally, like the English word, to lick. They want to lick the blood of the Jewish people. That's what they want to do. They want to see Jews destroyed. Why? Because what is our job in the world? To bring Or. You have to extinguish every single light if you want to make sure that the world will become kulo choshech. And in ner mitzvah, v'torah, Or. If we can extinguish and separate out that the Jewish people in their neshamos are associated with Chelek Elokam Imah, with the Or of Torah, then they are the unique threat to the designs of Amalek. Hence, Hitler Yamach Shemo, I'll say to my mother-in-law, whose family survived the Holocaust and has many, many interesting stories. Maybe she'll even share one with us. That there was a relentless pursuit of each and every Jewish man, woman, and child. Made no difference, because each one of them carried the light. And Hashem, in His wisdom and for His own purposes, as we don't understand fully, because we're in the darkness about it, is we saw something that had never taken place in the history of the Jewish people, in the history of the world. The relentless pursuit to kill every single man, woman, and child. And I was just reading a story about which Rebbe was it? The Rebbe who found the tcheles. You know about the Radzina Rebbe? The Radzina Rebbe spent a good amount of time trying to identify the tcheles. That was the mitzvah of his life, his desire to restore the tcheles. He identified it as a certain squid and so on, and they started manufacturing it. The Nazis wanted him dead. And there was a manhunt. What they did is they surrounded a town where they thought where he was, and then the Hasidim were told, unless they produced the Rebbe, they're all going to be killed. And one of his Gabayim put on a coat and made believe he was the Rebbe, and he was killed. But the Nazis found out that they were somehow hoodwinked. So they surrounded the next town and did the same thing. And this time, it says the Rebbe came out, and with all of his kavanas of dying al Kiddush Hashem, he spat in the face of the Nazi, who promptly shot him dead. What was their? I mean, isn't it enough? What is their desire? To eradicate the light. That Tcheles, that's the dawn. That's the beginning of the dawn of day sees the difference between Tcheles and Lavan. They cannot tolerate that. We must stay in the darkness. You cannot start the day. Okay. Therefore, when Hashem recreates the world from the damage of the Satan and the Egel Azav being the huge damage that he created, that he perpetrated on Klal Yisrael as they became a nation, which we're still recuperating from. I made the Mishkan. The Mishkan represents the world reconstructed. Now I have to understand. What's in the Kodesh Kodashim? The Aron Kodesh. What is it covered by? It's covered by a paroches. What covers the Aron HaEdus itself? It's called Edus, which means two witnesses. It has two witnesses on it. What are those witnesses? The Kruvim. Now, you know how it's laid out? Is it laid out sideways or lengthwise? It's laid out lengthwise. So in other words, if you're facing the Aron Kodesh, the two poles are sticking out at you. And in fact, it says that they protruded like they were giving mother's milk. They were sustaining the world. That's what it says. They protruded a little bit from behind the curtains.
So is that why they never were removed?
Why the parochas was never removed?
No, the staves, the poles.
Yes, that's one very good explanation why. And what are these kruvim, or what are they all about? I mean, what is it trying to show us? If it's a symbol of the world, we understand the world exists in two realms. There's Shemayim and Aretz. Hashem, Ramchal outlines it, Rambam outlines it, Chazal outline it. There are 10 different levels of malachim. I was looking at Rambam. It's a simple Rambam, Hilchos Deos. The last level of malachim that interact with man, because we know that there are angels that interact with us. Neshamos. Which neshamos are the most frequently talking to us or being in charge? Give me examples that you know that of actually in Tanakh where Malach came and spoke. Where did a Malach come and speak? You have yes, you have by Shimshon, which is our neighborhood here, Shimshon. They didn't know he was a Malach. They thought he was a person. At least he thought it was a person until he jumps onto the Mizbeach, into the fire, and goes upward. Avram Avinu saw Malachim, right? And also we speak about Yaacov. Where do you see Yaacov fighting with the Malach of Esav? Literally tangling Malach of Esav. Who else?
Even
Hagar saw Malachim, exactly. Because in the house of Avram, Malachim were frequent visitors. Because that was the point of contact of the Shekhinah. Where you're coming into contact with Hashem, the intersection between that world and this world is the Malachim. And they kind of poke into this world. They intrude into our world, but they are still very hidden, like the staves of the Aron Kodesh. Protrude in, but not seen. So what is the parochas then? What's on the parochas? What's on the parochas? Kruvim. More kruvim. More kruvim, right? So what is it really saying? That there's two worlds. There's the world of the Das and Ratzon Hashem, which is the Torah itself, which preceded creation, hidden away, which we cannot really access and understand. That represents the Ratzon of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And then there are these Malachim that Hashem created around him in the various worlds, right? And then he put up a paroches. And that paroches is Olam Hazeh, this world. So the Malachim... The paroches itself represents the curtain between the two dimensions, between the dimension of our physical world and the spiritual world, which again are interacting all the time, but we don't see it in a clear way. And if there is an interaction, it's on a very low level, because it's the lowest level of malachim called Ishim. They're like in the shape of human beings, like Avram saw, like Yaacov wrestled with, like Hagar saw, and even in our generations, it still continues in whose form that comes down. He was originally a person though, because it's a lower level. Eliyahu Hanavi. Even in our generation, as little as maybe 30, 40 years ago, there are people about whom it was said that they had Gilui Eliyahu. Eliyahu Lopian was one of them. He was in Eretz Yisrael. You had a number of people that they had Gilui Eliyahu. Eliyahu spoke to them.
The body went up too?
Eliyahu's body became its angelic form. Okay. Moshe Rabbeinu's body too was almost an angelic form. What does that mean, angelic form? Go to the metaphor of darkness and light. What's covering this paroches? What's covering our neshama, which is kulo or? Our bodies, our physical bodies. It's a paroches shel or with an ayin, which means skin, covering over the or with an aleph, which is light. What happened to Moshe Rabbeinu? When he goes up to Shemaim and he reaches that level, not the first time, but the second time, when he saves Klal Yisrael, which is bigger than, saving Klal Yisrael is bigger than getting the Torah. After he got the Torah, his face was still dark. When he saved Klal Yisrael, why? Because that's the point. If you save Klal Yisrael, that's when the or, if it's going to be just Moshe, it's still a lot of darkness around. If it's Am Yisrael, there's a lot of light. Okay, and that's our job to be. That's right. He had to cover his face, but he didn't cover his face when he spoke to Klal Yisrael. He covered his face when he wasn't speaking to Klal Yisrael. That's right. That's the origin of the Purim masks, by the way, according to some. Moshe was the original Purim costume. Yeah, the mask. Why did he have a mask? Because he wanted to be humble. He didn't want to show himself that he's different than the rest of mankind, which he was. But Moshe reached that level. Eliyahu Navi similarly went up. And that is what Chazal tells us is going to happen to each and every one of us, Be'ezus Hashem, and everybody in this room. I give you a tremendous bracha that you should come up in Tchias HaMesim in an easy and simple way and early in the process. A lot of people come a lot earlier than others. It's like the post office. Lahavdil. You get a number with an SMS, without an SMS, and you're waiting around. Yeah. The tzaddikim come first. Avos, and they're there to greet every single Jew as they. What happens is that our bodies, the paroches is lifted, and the light of the Aron Kodesh shines directly on us, and our bodies become something different. Our bodies will become kulo or. We will be light beings. We will go from or with an ayin to or with an aleph. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be entities. It doesn't even mean that we're not going to be physical in some sense. But our physicality will be such, like the physicality of fire, electricity. It's physical, but it's not exactly something you can pick up and toss or even hold. You can't hold it. You can't even touch it, really. And that's why we need them. That's why we need the paroches, so that Klal Yisrael will not be burnt by the great or that Hashem really wants to give us. Like I said, the mother's milk. Hashem wants to give us the light, but can we receive it? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the menorah. It is unbelievable. There's an unbelievable amount written about the menorah representing the foundation of the world itself. What does this mean? The keli to hold the light. You understand? The keli that holds the light. The light is Hashem. The light is even our own neshamos. So when the menorah is lit, what it represents is the neshamos of the Jewish people. That's the reminder for the dog to bark. Okay. And that means that the world is receiving light and is therefore saturated with Kedusha, and we call that status Sharias Shechina B'Yisrael. The Shechina has an ability to rest on people like Nevi'im, on Klal Yisrael, on our individual homes. First place where Shechina was ever Shora was where? Give me the first geographical location where the Shechina ever resided. After Gan Eden, I'm talking about. Burning the Sneh was an example of it, yeah? Where was the first place that this light, that this Shechina, was able to be sustained in a physical reality? Where? Correct. Sarah's tent, which was the same phenomenon for Rivka's tent. It says when Yisro came in and saw that his wife was doing, as the Targum says, Asa uvde de Sarah imei, he followed in the path of Sarah, it was illuminated. And that is the idea of the Ner Tamid, or the Ner Ma'aravi, which is, as the Or Chaim HaKadosh here says in the Parsha, is the existence that the Shechina is in contact with the Jewish people, who are the primary recipients to to receive the Torah. And then it spills over to the Umos HaOlam. Literally. It spills down to the Makom HaMikdash and then emanates outwards from there to all the nations of the world. Now, let's break down the menorah a little bit. It's a very complicated design. Moshe Rabbeinu was so perplexed by it that what happened?
God gave him fire.
That Hashem showed him the image. He still couldn't figure out how to make it. And what they did is they cast the gold into a fire and it emerged by itself. Very interesting. What else do you remember that was thrown into a fire and emerges ki'ilu by itself?
Shekel, the heifer shekel?
No, the shekel didn't emerge by itself. The Egel Hazav, Zeh Mul Zeh. The menorah is the direct antithesis of the Egel Hazav. It's Zeh Mul Zeh. It's Yisrael versus Amalek. It's exactly that. In fact, according to Midrashim, the sons of Bilam were sent and along as plants, as spies, as terrorists within Klal Yisrael, and they're the ones who perpetrated a whole thing. But now, so if the menorah is the anti-Egel Hazav, then it has to do exactly the opposite of the Egel Hazav, which is this idea. And said very beautifully by the Bnei Yissaschar in his Maimer on Chodesh Adar. He says that our belief, and it's uniquely of Klal Yisrael, we originated a concept that Hashem's hashgacha, pratis, over nature is down to the most infinite detail, which breaks the idea that there is some sort of hefsek between nature and the Ratzon Hashem. In other words, that paroches, the nations of the world saw as a finite separation. There's no interaction from behind the paroches. They didn't argue the fact that there's a creator or even someone who's very interested in the events of the world, but they believed in a non-interference. That once nature was created, you were governed by the laws of nature, and that's all. They didn't dispute the fact that there are God, maybe many gods, but nature is nature is nature, and that is the choshech of Yavan, right? Which means that the wisdom of the world limited itself to understanding and comprehending what was visible to the naked eye. Okay? Whereas there's another wisdom that goes beyond that wisdom, and what's that wisdom? Chachmas HaTorah. Okay, so here we go. There are 7 branches to the menorah. Okay, here we go. So buckle your seatbelts. We're going to give you a lot of information. Number 1, says the Balaturim, 7 branches in the menorah correspond to the 7 heavens, which correspond to the 7 lands. Unless you ask me, what are the 7 heavens and what are the 7 lands? Which means that it permeates the world. It doesn't separate. It's not separate from the world. Adarabba, it's a foundation of the world. So the Balaturim explained it like this. Number 1, the 7 heavens are, number 1, this is a Gemara Chagiga, Yud Beis Amud Beis. It's also an Avos of Nasan. Number 1 is Vilon, which is called a curtain. This is the thing that draws back and allows sunshine into the world. In other words, that would be called the lowest heaven. That would represent even like almost a paroches of sorts that goes between the 2 worlds. The next one up is called Rakia. Rakia is where the sun and the planets find their station. That's definitely an upper. It's way above. That's what we're talking about in space already. Shechakim is a higher level than that. It's where mana emanated from for tzaddikim, and that is a place where the neshamos of tzaddikim interact with the physical world. By the way, Ramchal says this. He says that how does it happen that Hashem's will comes down to us? So he says it comes down through the stars and the planetary systems, which was the mistake that all of the Avodah Zarah made. They thought that was it. He said, no, but behind that, there's neshamos of tzaddikim that are preparing the mun, which means that is the holy shefa that's coming down through these mediums. They're just channels. They're faucets pouring down. That's why it's called mazal. Mazal means nozel. It means it's pouring down. Hashem is pouring down his gifts to us. So the third heaven is already the source of that shefa. The fourth heaven is called zvul. In that is where the Beis HaMikdash Lamala is. We know that we speak about Mikdashei Elyon. There's a Beis HaMikdash up top, and there's a Beis HaMikdash below, and they're mechuvan zeh above zeh. How does that work? The minute that the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, according to Ramchal, in Shamayim, the third Beis HaMikdash came into place. Okay, the third and final Beis HaMikdash, on a spiritual level, took its place in Zvul, in the fourth Rakia. Why the third and not the second? Because the second was just a transition. As some people say, the second Beis HaMikdash was a Sheina Beis Knesses, a Feina Beis Medrash. It was a beautiful place, but what didn't it have? It didn't have the Aron, it didn't have the various miracles, its Insenis Haman, all those things, which will come back to us, Mitzvah Shem, in the third Beis HaMikdash. So it was a transition. In fact, the Beis HaMikdash Hasheni was already built based on the design that Yecheskel saw of the third Beis HaMikdash. Yecheskel, who lived before the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, right? It's like Yecheskel, he envisioned the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Him and Yirmiyahu were the prophets of destruction, as it were. But he also was the prophet which saw the future. And he was given the entire view of the third Beis HaMikdash and everything that would happen, which is a fascinating subject in itself, but it's all there, down to the last detail. And what Hashem was telling him is, don't worry, we're now transitioning between. But till below starts to look like above, there's still darkness, there's still that paroches between us and the world above. The fifth Rakia is called Ma'on. Ma'on is where the angels say Shira. Okay? So that's again higher. It doesn't really have a direct connection to this world. And the fourth heaven still does, because that's the Beis HaMikdash Lamala, which corresponds to Lamata, but above that is Shira. Then on the sixth level is called Machon. You know what they send the kids before they go to the army? Machon. Right, that's number 6. All right. And the final one is called, where is it going? I think that's called Shamayim. So that realm is the realm beyond that, which belongs to, so to speak, Hashem and the Kisei HaKavod. Okay, so Chazal tell us that when Avram Avinu came into the world, he started pulling down the curtains. He started pulling down the Shekhinah from level to level. It was in the seventh heaven, down lower and lower and lower, until it actually touched down in this world, literally making the distance between the Shemayim and Aretz to be nil. And that's what the Beis HaMikdash really is. It's the point of contact between the upper realm and the lower realm. It's a point of contact. Ramchal tells us that the Even Shesiyah, the foundation stone, is the actual place where when Hashem pours down all the Shefa, starting with the upper heavens, it lands here, and it has connections to the entire world. In other words, there are tributaries and branches. It's like think about an electric station that sends out electricity to everywhere, to every individual house. Where's the power station? The power station is the Even Shesiyah. And then it branches out to the rest of the world. If there's no Beis HaMikdash, the electricity station is basically destroyed. It's operating on very, very low currency and capability. That's why we, mankind, are so filled with darkness. That's why a parkland can happen, because our neshamas are so dark, because we're not illuminated with Or HaTorah. And therefore the Satan can pretty much play with us whichever way he wants. All right, now let's go on to another analogy of 7. 7 lands. There are 7 aratzos. They are described different terminologies that are used. Eretz, which is synonymous with earth, by the way. Earth is known as Eretz in its connections to the world. Also, the next one is called Adama. That's on a higher level because that's where Adam comes from, right? Adam is from the Adam. Arka, Yirmiyahu calls it Arka. And some of the other terms are Yabasha, Cheled, Charava. These are all terms from the Navi and from Tehillim. And that means that the lands themselves have madregos. Okay? And what's, of course, the highest of the lands is Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is the transitional land between the inert lower lands and the spiritual land. That's why Eretz Yisrael has such an unusual history. And that's why living here can be very confusing. As we all know, a friend of mine came from Schwartz and he was trying to take care of certain things, and I saw him yesterday, and he goes to me, "Things move very slowly here." You know, I said, "Welcome to Israel." In other words, I said, "Why?" He says, "Because in Israel, every single thing needs a tefillah to Hashem. Because you're in Hashem's place. And you don't just walk around and do what you want. You're in the Palter and Shel Melech. You got to ask permission. I mean, let's say you're a guest in some palatial palace, right? And you're walking around. You're going to go around and say, "Hey, let me check out this room. Let me check out that room. Let me do this. Let me do that." Everything you're going to do, you're going to say, May I enter this room? May I go here? You think I can have something to eat? You think, yeah, you got to daven on everything. So the highest land is going to be Eretz Yisrael. And of course, the highest land among the lands is Yerushalayim. And then, of course, among that, as Chazal tell us, the highest Kedusha, the Eser Kedushos in Eretz Yisrael, and the highest of the Kedushos is literally Kodesh Kodashim, which is the point of contact and everything. So you see how everything fits together. All right, that's just one thing. Now let's go on to the construct of the menorah. There were 3 designs that the menorah had. Number 1, there were cups, givim. Number 2, there were kaftorim, which are spheres or balls. And number 3, there were prachim. There were flowers. How many of each? It's a big question of how they were formatted. Even there's a machloka between the Rambam and other Rishonim about whether it was a curved menorah or whether it was a triangular menorah, right? And historical evidence seems to show that it's a circular, but that doesn't mean that that was the one that was in the Kodesh Kodashim. It could be that they made other menorah that way. Do we know whether the menorah, where is the most famous historical depiction of the menorah, besides what they keep finding archaeological thing, is the Arch of Titus in Rome. The Arch of Titus in Rome was constructed to celebrate the crushing of the Jewish revolt against the Romans. This is after the Beis HaMikdash, some 100, at the year about 150 or so. And I read its account in Josephus. It's something you have to read, but only on Tisha B'Av. It's actually frightening, the spectacle that they made out of it. And apparently the Romans were so advanced in their ability to construct machinery that they built massive floats, literally floats, for a parade, each one depicting a bloody scene of destruction of the enemies. That they were parading their dam, Am Lake, lick the blood. It was literally all blood, bloody displays. And then they cut off the head of Shimon Bar Yochai, the last Jewish general. Then they brought Karbanos to Avodah Zarah, and they all had a big party. End of Judaism. End. Sof. So they thought. And if I were there, and if you were there, you would say, it's the final fight. Literally, lahavdil, the final solution. You would think, no, not so fast. Before you know it, Antoninus is bowing down to Rabbi a few years later and realizing that all the chachma and all the ore of the world only comes from Am Yisrael. Otherwise, they should figure that out already. So what is the meaning of these things? First of all, why cups? Why gevim? What does it have to do with anything? Number 2, why kaftorim, which are spheres, balls? Not pomegranates. There's a lot of pomegranates in the Beis HaMikdash. Where are there pomegranates in the Beis HaMikdash? Rimonim. On the Kohen Gadol's robe. Because a pomegranate is not a perfect sphere. Okay? A pomegranate kind of widens out, and it's very far from a perfect circle. Would you agree? Yeah. Besides that, So the kaftorim, like our buttons, are usually perfect circles. And this was balls, spheres. Why? And the third thing is flowers. Also, the numbers are very strange. 22 cups, 11 kaftorim, and 9 flowers. What could it possibly mean? So I asked this question of my friend Rabbi Smiles, and he says to me, oh, the Talmud of the Vilna Gaon has an explanation. Rabbi Isaac Chaver was one of the legendary scholars from the Masoret of the Vilna Gaon, and he said, in the name of the Vilna Gaon, the following explanations. And this is really will blow your mind. So again, so far we've had the fact that the 7 branches represent the 7 worlds, the 7 lands, and the 7 rakiot. So it's the foundation of receiving Hashem's wisdom into the world, and connecting that world behind the parochas with the world below the parochas. And however, the Talmud of the Gra said an even more profound thing. Hold on. So, this is what he says. First of all, the 22 cups correspond to what other famous 22? The Aleph Beis. The Aleph Beis, because everything that Hashem rains down upon us comes down in the form of Hebrew letters with which He created the world. Sefer Yetzirah, by the way, it was one of the original books of Kabbalah, goes into in-depth explanation about the Hebrew letters and what role they played in creation. I call them energy packets. They're packets of energy. There's a word for that. There's a word for that in modern science about energy. Okay. All right. So that's one reference. But then he says another reference. 11. Why 11? Kaftorim. What's 11 is comprised of which 2 numbers? 6 and 5. Does 6 and 5 strike any familiarity to you? What is 6 and 5? Torah Shebechsav is 5 svarim. Torah Shebal Peh, 6 svarim. Together, I'll add a perfect sphere, means that the Torah is indivisible. The Torah Shebal Peh and the Torah Shebechsav form one perfect sphere of Torah. But without that, you have an imperfect knowledge of Torah. All right? 9, he has a Kabbalistic explanation that's about partsufim and stuff like that, way, way beyond, okay? Beyond the scope of what I can understand. I'm sorry. You have to call in the Mekubalim from Yerushalayim to explain that one to you. However, there is a more simple explanation. So this is what the Gaon said is a deeper remez to all this. Okay. He said those 22 cups, those 11 spheres, those 9 flowers are coded into the first psukim in the Torah of every sefer. Okay? Bereshis has how many words in the first pasuk? Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. 7. The first thing is, understand that Hashem's agenda is to get the Chachmas HaTorah from behind the Paroches, use the Malachim to get the information down to us. How do I know the Malachim teach Torah? Where do we see the Malachim teach Torah? The Gemara Nida. What does the Gemara Nida say? Where do Malachim teach Torah?
In the womb.
In utero. We're still behind the Paroches. You understand? We're literally. When we come out to the ore of the light of the world, the Malachim have taught us Torah. And where we're going to get it back, we get smacked on the lip, right? To remind us, chaser po mashu, got to start learning, got to start saying, got to start learning the words of the Torah, which begin with what lesson? Aleph, Beis, Gimel. Okay, first thing you teach a child, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, the micro packets of ore are in there, all right? Now, so says the Vilna Gaon, okay, 7, which we learned as the 7 lands, the 7 heavens. That's Bereshis. What is Shmos? In Ve'ele Shmos, there are 11 words in the first pasuk. That represents the 11 spheres. And I think it makes sense for Shmos, because what happens in Sefer Shmos? We receive the actual Torah written and oral. Unless you think that it was just the Torah Shebichsav we got, no. Sefer Shmos incorporates 11, the perfect sphere of Torah. 6 of Mishnah and 5 of Bichtav. Vayikra has 9 words in its first pasuk, and that represents the 9 flowers. Okay, now here's something interesting. 9 is 10 chaser 1, 10 chaser 1. So one of the explanations he gives here is that where is the first of the Dibros originating? Anochi Hashem Elokecha is ki'ilu behind in the upper spheres. As you move down through the Aseres Dibros, we get lower and lower into this world. And if you want to think of it that way, it's stages. Lo yela Elohim achrim, don't have any other gods, because you're going to get confused by all the constellations and everything. Don't get confused, right? And then where do we go? And then don't make any pasilim, right? And then we go to finally Kibbut Av V'Aim, which is birth. You see, we're going down from the highest down to the birth, and then when we go right, excuse me, Shabbos, and then Kibbut Av V'Aim. Why Shabbos? Again, okay, we have to take just a break to change the battery. To live and try to work out the challenges of this physical world is because we're not in Gan Eden and we don't have everything delivered to us on a silver platter. It says that Adam used to receive shipudim, what do you call them? Barbecue? Kebabs? Shipudim. He used to get kebabs delivered to him. You know, it was the first Jewish kosher takeout. I hope it was kosher. Yeah, you would think he's vegetarian. So there's a Tosfos that says that he never killed any animals, but he could, if he wanted to, eat the dead animals, or meat, or whatever. It was probably soy protein or something along those lines, right? Veggie burgers. Shipudei veggie burgers. Didn't have to do anything. Sit in the gan and soak in the sunshine. Isn't it interesting? Human beings, you know, they think that the greatest thing you could possibly do, especially Israelis, is what? Sit by the beach in the sun. That's what people do. They think that that's the, you know, when I see somebody, you made it, you retired, retire early. We see a person on the beach in the sun, as if that's the whole thing. Well, on some level, that's true. But in a more spiritual level, you're soaking in the Or HaTorah without worrying about fighting through the makos, the 39 makos of this world, the trials and tribulations of this world. Okay, so Vayikra, which includes the Torat Kohanim, it's the Kohanim's job. They are the primary teachers of Torah. Because even in the Sanhedrin, the Kohanim, who are considered the purest and holiest and most muvdal, and have the purest seichel, because they're with Hashem, they're soaking in the sunshine, as it were, they then bring down those 9 measures. They're on the first level. They bring it down to Klal Yisrael. And that's why who learns Vayikra first? Children who are on that pure, pristine level where they're not smitten with the 39 makos of this world, and they're just learning their aleph beis, and that's what we teach them. Okay, let's move on to Bamidbar. Now, Bamidbar, according to the Vilna Gaon, has in its first, as we know, in the first pasuk, 17 words. That represents the fact that the menorah's total height is what? 18 tvachim, representing what? Chai, life, because chiyus comes from the Torah. Our Torah is our source of Jewish immortality, right? Without Torah, Jews disconnected from Torah will last physically a generation or two, but nothing more. So the Yud Zayin, says the Vagon, is the remez that the menorah takes us right up to Chaim, right up to 18. That's our source of life we have to connect to. In the pasuk Rishon of Devarim, there are 22 words. Eila Dvarim Asher Diber Moshe v'chula v'chula. And that's 22 words in the first pasuk, and that represents the 22 cups. That's what it says. El mul pnei ha-menorah yi'iru shivas haneros. So, and then it goes beyond that if you take the number 22, 11, and 9 together, it equals 42, which is the 42 permutation number of Hashem's name, which is known as the Shem HaMefurish. That was the name that was pronounced only where? In the Beis HaMikdash. Get it? The place where the Or originates from. That 42-letter name of Hashem only was revealed then. Okay? And it was the building block of the Sheshimei Bereshis. Okay. Now, but there's a little bit more. Actually, another remez is that there are 7. There are really not 5 books of the Torah. There are really 7. Does anybody know how there are 7 Sifrei Torah, not 5?
Or there's one pasuk in between.
Vayibin Sa'aron, which is in the 11th parak of Bamidbar, is surrounded by 2 nuns, 2 backward nuns, right? Which sections it off as its own little sefer. And what does it say? Vayibin Sa'aron vayom Moshe kum Hashem. And what does it end with? Uvenucho Yomar. Where do we utilize this little sefer? How do we utilize the pasukim in this little sefer? When we want the Torah to come out, we say Vayibin Sa'aron. When we put the Torah back, it's Venucho Yom. By the way, it's interesting halacha. Do you know that when a Sefer Torah is in a fixed position, do you have to stand or can you sit? You can sit. The guy who does Hagba, right, sits. You don't make him put the Torah back. He's allowed to sit and hold the Torah. What happens when the Torah starts to move? You better move. Everybody moves. Why? Make up your mind. It's like, if we want to honor the Torah, because the Torah is out of the Aron Kodesh, so stand. Stand the whole time. And if you don't need to stand, then why, when it starts moving, do you have to get up? So the answer is, if the Shekhinah is present in a particular place, it's a Makom Torah. It's a place, it's an ear, Shel Chachamim and Sofrim, where the Shekhinah resides, you can sit down. That's where you want to be. Sit down. That's exactly where you want to be. If the Torah seems to be moving off into another direction, in a different community, in a different place, you better follow the Torah. You understand? You have to be where the Shekhinah is. If the Shekhinah is on the move, you go. Now, it just so happens, I checked it out, but the first, those 2 psukim also are 17 words in Vayibin Sa'aron, and then there's 19 words in the part of Bamidbar that comes afterwards. 17 and 19 average out to 18. So it's the same idea, the same remez, that's the foundation of the Torah. So what do we see? The entire world is resting on this foundation. The menorah represents the fact that nature is not movdal from what's behind the paroches. And that's the Iker message of Amalek versus Am Yisrael. Amalek says, Haman goes to Mordechai, what are you doing? You're sitting and learning with these little kids. He was learning Torah with little kids. You know what he was learning? He was learning about the carbon mincha, where you take a little bit of mincha. He says you take a little bit of flour, a little bit of solet, and you're going to use it for karbonos to Hashem. And so Haman mocked Mordechai, sitting learning with the little children. He says, my 10,000, sterling ingots of silver worth millions of dollars are certainly going to outweigh the little dust that you're playing with over here. And the answer is it does not. It does not. Because Klal Yisrael ultimately has mincha, menucha, which spells out Shechina, Chen, Chesed, like my wife's name, Chani, Chen, Chesed, Rachmi. Chen is the makom of resting place of Shechina. That's a schus. And ultimately, it does impact the world of the 10,000 shekels. It will ultimately, that little bit will outweigh all of those shekels. That's the message, and that's the ultimate struggle. The malach of we're going to stop momentarily, but the malach of Esav, that represents Amalek, that fought Yaakov. Where does he damage Yaakov? In the Gid ha-Nasha. So there's two interpretations of that. One means, what was Yaakov doing? He was struggling to walk, right? Soleya al Yerecho, because the legs represent what you stand on, and that represents independence, right? You're not dependent on anybody. You can walk yourself, which means you have economic independence. You have money. You have parnasa to establish yourself and build your home, build Mekomos Torah. If you don't have money, you're struggling to establish yourself. So that's where Esav hits us, in the financial pocket. He's always creating, economic difficulties that the Jew has to overcome in order to establish Torah, instead of it flowing automatically. And then the second thing is Giranasha is the children, which is that if we can separate the children from Torah, then we know we've got them. Then we lost that continuity. So Hayotze Mikol Zeh is that our challenge, especially at a time of Purim, is to understand that if we don't have the concept of the entire structure of the world is going to benefit when we connect the nature to the beyond nature. That is our message. That is what we have to produce into this world. That's a lesson. That's our Or L'Goyim. There's something behind all of this. There's a little mincha, a flower, that actually outweighs, because that's the significance. And Hashem wants to protrude into this world and give us everything good. And once you cut Hashem off, what are you cutting yourself off from? From Chai, from the 18 Tvachim Hai Menorah. You're cutting off life. You're actually mortality. And that's what's associated with Amalek, is what? Death. Death. Aaron HaKohen, when he was given the job of lighting the menorah, he was comforted that he wasn't part of the building of the Mishkan. Why? Because this is very simple. The Mishkan was putting it together. But how are you going to make sure that the whole thing sustains itself? The whole purpose is that we should continuously impact the world. This is how I was going to show you. When we're going to get to Hanukkah, when we get to the time of Hanukkah, when the Greeks are going to try to convince the world that there is no other Chachma except Chachmas of nature, you're going to see that there's 7 branches of a menorah behind it. I guess I have to add this one last thing. Don't kill me. The ancient world came up with 7, what's called the 7 wisdoms. You know what the 7 natural wisdoms are? This is the curriculum of the Greek university of Aristotle. You ready? The first one is called logic. Is proving things like through proofs of logic. You have to really, seeking truth, you have to you can't make up stuff. You have to be able to prove it logically. That's the first issue, that there's only human logic. And if it doesn't make sense in human logic, you can't, it doesn't exist. Language is the second sort of chachma. People learn our language. Who mastered all the languages and therefore rose to the top of the Goyish world? Yosef. So mastery of language is very, very important. Mathematics is the third chachma. Geometry, which also leads to be able to build stuff and to design stuff, right? Because if you can't have geometry, you don't have any sort of architecture, is the fourth wisdom. Music is the fifth wisdom, to create and write music. Biology and psychology, the study of man, is the sixth wisdom. And then you guessed it, astronomy, astrology, the study of the heavens, is the seventh wisdom. So I thought they match the 7 Sifrei Torah match each of them, because it's one fluid connection, not separated. How does it go? It goes like this: that the first book, which is Bereshis, right, would be against which wisdom? Probably against the idea of logic, because that's the logic of the world. Shemos is language. Eila Shemos B'nai Yisrael, right? Mathematics is Bamidbar, I believe, because that's where we count people. And geometry design is when we speak about the Mishkan. Biology, psychology, all these are outgrowths of the Vayhi bin So Aaron and so on. I can't go into too much detail because I'm getting the cutoff sign. but I'll owe you a more discussion about seeing how all the 7 ancient wisdoms are really an outgrowth of the Torah logic, and that's part of what the Torah teaches us. The darkness in the mind of the Parkland shooter comes from his confusion about good and bad, and about, that he was adopted Jewish, that kid? And Amalek is all about the wasted potential, that it could have been good. The Nachash was so good, and yet when he when he felt rejected and he felt out of it, he turned all of his good possibilities into evil. Timnah wanted to be part of Klal Yisrael. She turns to be the mother of Amalek. Amalek's all about wasted opportunity to connect. When you disconnect, and therefore Nebuch, I think it's something for the Jewish community to think about. Nebuch, maybe they should have adopted this kid. Both his parents died. His adopted parents both died, and then he goes shooting. So why didn't the rest of the Jewish community adopt the kid? Ask yourself that question. And we have to bring light into that Amalek-like mind, and Bezos Hashem, by bringing light of truth, we should really defeat Amalek finally. Amen.
Was he like a converted Jew?
Mm-hmm.